Please let this work.
Third time's a charm.
Please welcome Amy Eaton.
Thank you.
Welcome to Louder Than a Mom, Quarantine Edition. We were supposed to be live on Facebook. It didn't work out, which is apropos of our theme this month, unfinished business. Enjoy.
There were guns in the church at my grandmother's funeral. At least 6 of them strapped to my father's and uncle's ankles or belts, probably more, given the number of law enforcement officials paying their respects. For me, an absurd ratio of gun to mourners, jam-packed in the small white congregational church in Stoddard, the town my grandmother had called home for over 60 years. Over those 6 decades, my family would be heavily involved in the communication, distribution of resources, lawmaking, and law enforcement of this itty-bitty corner of the world. My family could sit on the porch and know who was driving every single goddamned car that came down the road, every single one. They were like stumbling upon some peculiar anthropological tribal union. At one point, someone suggested, perhaps not kindly, that the whole town should just be renamed Eatonville. My grandparents raised 6 boys in Stoddard. They all ran the family general store and the gas pumps. My grandmother ran the town post office from a corner of the general store. My father, the eldest, swears he pumped $5 worth of gas for people when he was so young, he had to ask the customer to tell him when the pumps had reached the number 5. Meals were spent with brothers taking turns leaving the table to wait on customers as they heard the bell chime for a customer's entrance. They were state troopers and sheriffs, volunteer firefighters, actively involved in the running of the town's institutions. Grandpa and Brother 3 were Republican state senators. Brother 6, the lone Democrat, has served in the House of Representatives off and on since 1976. I spent my childhood summers here, never fully belonging, but feeling of here, but not truly from here, part of a curious custody agreement brokered between my parents, or perhaps my mom and my grandparents, schlepped by my dad from the small upstate New York City where I lived, and with my mom dropped into a sea of testosterone as all the adult brothers left home, then bounced back home repeatedly. There was always someone living at home besides my grandparents. Someone to help with the store, someone sitting at the table in the kitchen downstairs, trading insults over coffee or beer, someone talking about chickies they'd met, or endless cock blocking. When pictures were taken, the brothers automatically lined up by age. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I digress. I had you at a funeral, one with guns. My sons and I had stayed at Brother 4, my favorite, and in Keene after Mongo's wake. He would be delivering his mother's eulogy. He is not a minister, but like I said, it's a tribe. He does the weddings and the funerals. I expect he will perform the funerals of brothers 1 through 5, but not brother number 6. The morning of the funeral, he headed up to Stoddard early to be sure everything was set, and he asked me to drive his wife, who's blind. Get there early to get a seat, he told me. The church will be packed. I know, I told him, and I meant it. I've driven the route from Keene to Stoddard hundreds of times, ridden it thousands, but it didn't matter. When we arrived, cars lined the road for a quarter mile from the church. We parked, and once we got in, I scanned the room and found one of the last seats available in a far pew. My dad, brothers 2, 3, 5, and their families were all sitting in the front center pews as Brother 4 sat near the podium, readying the funeral service. Brother 5, the family documentarian and the biggest smartass, fussed with a camera lens and a large flash as he wandered behind the pulpit and through the aisle snapping photos. I kept scanning. I didn't see 6. I wondered, would he even show up? He hadn't come to the wake the night before. As things wrapped up at the wake at the funeral home last night, Brother 5 had said as he put his camera away, well, this will be good tomorrow. There'll be some laughs, some tears, and hopefully no blood. Yep, great. My father gave me a side eye as we filed in with a barely noticeable shake of his head. I felt like an idiot. I guided my uncle's wife into the pew and then shooed my boys in before me, sitting closest to the aisle. My boys are tall, only 11 and 15. They are both taller than I am. My 15-year-old nearly 6 feet. Months later, I will realize I'd done this on purpose, my motherly instincts winning out over any debts I might feel to my family of origin. If shit was going to hit the fan, I wanted to be as far away from the middle of it as possible. Brother 6 did show up. He came in even later than I and stood by the back entry of the church. Brother 4 called him out during the eulogy, a serpent, a viper, that he tried to take advantage of his ailing mother and sued her repeatedly, appealing when he lost. There were murmurs from the back of the church, tisking in support of Brother 6. I tensed. waiting for someone to blow, listening for the snap of a holster or a click of a trigger, waiting for a raised voice to spin things out of control, ready to shove my boys onto the pew or the floor below me for cover. I'd been joking that the funeral would be too early for the Eaton family cocktail, which is 1 part firearms, 2 parts booze mixed with equal parts of being in the right. Unlike that asshole. But now I'm not so sure. So how did we get here? Well, to explain that, I got to go back to 1988, to my grandfather's funeral. At the end of the wake the night before Grandpa's funeral, number 4 said to my dad, well, this has gone well so far, which is apparently a thing we say at funerals. My father replied, yeah, let's just hope 6 doesn't act like an asshole and screw it all up. 6 overheard and he threw a hissy fit about it, saying, well, now I know what my brothers really think of me. But he was an asshole. I mean, all the brothers could be assholes, but 6 really took the cake. I mean, brother 6 can be charming. He makes promises he doesn't keep and agrees with whatever side of an argument you happen to be on. He probably has no real moral compass of his own. I mean, they can all be charming. No one's ever minced words in my family when it comes to insults. Asshole was sort of typical dinner chat, as in, pass the green beans, asshole. I mean, we could be way more colorful and creative than that. Well, at first he wouldn't talk to my dad, and then he wouldn't talk to 4, and over the next 2 decades, he remained living at home with his mother. He eventually cut out each brother one by one. Mongo developed Alzheimer's, and brother 2 and his wife took over as her medical and legal powers of attorney. 6 sued his mother, wanting to inherit the home he grew up in, which he'd always told me nobody else cared about. Brothers tried to make inroads of goodwill, but 6 dug his heels in back and forth, and until the stories became mind-boggling gossip that you couldn't keep up with. There was a back surgery, there was pain meds, there were insinuations and accusations of all sorts of unsavory things. And when I Googled 6's name, I found a political action committee mailer chaired by my dad, calling his brother corrupt and unethical, among other things. Before Mongo's Alzheimer's had finally gotten a grip on her, she announced that she'd like to have her boys home for Easter dinner, all of them. When my dad told me this, I started to voice concern and he cut me off. Aim, no one's going to this Easter dinner that's not packing heat. From then on, when anyone went to the house, they did so armed. Think about it. You went to visit your elderly mother with Alzheimer's, who might or might not recognize you, but only if you were armed. I remember riding the same route for my grandfather's funeral 26 years ago. When Grandpa died, it was right after New Year's. I was a senior in college. His death was a shock, but it was the last time the family really came together. All 6 Eaton boys together, my grandmother, my 2 cousins and myself, wrapped up in a grief that was devastating, but it was somehow magical. It snowed huge fat flakes all that day. His funeral service had been at a church in Keene, so the ride up to Stoddard Cemetery was the hearse, the family, and several fancy black cars, and a long, long procession of cars that went on for miles. The hearse stopped at the town fire station across the road from my grandparents' house and what had been their general store for 30 years. Outside, the volunteer force stood rigid at attention in the bitter cold and the fat falling snow, in their jeans and the volunteer fire shirts, silently saluting while the fire engine's siren wailed and wailed. When it stopped, the hearse turned up the road to the center of town to the graveyard. But this ride, for Mongo's funeral, is in late June and we're scattered, arriving piecemeal. That sense of cohesiveness is gone, or maybe it's just gone for me. I left the East Coast at 24 and I never looked back. I mean, I come back to visit a few days every couple of years, but it's just not the same as it was for me. This is not a landing spot for my children. They feel foreign here even more than I did growing up. I'm of here, but not from here. My boys have little attachment to New Hampshire. The things that hold me in sentimental thrall, just leave them cool. They're neither from nor of here. They are both big city Midwestern boys, isolated from the extended family they have on the East Coast by distance and people's schedules. I hate this. I'm grateful for this. I hate this. Because there are guns in this church, and the weight of the family history and complications that go with them are something I don't want them to have to bear. I want them spared that boulder that I've lugged around all my life, but yet I see their faces. They know. There's a tribe that they are not really part of. Like me, they know. They're outsiders. Thank God.
So we're so glad you got to do that. We're really excited for our next storyteller. She's a volunteer, advocate, writer, teacher, student, daughter, sister, wife, mother, friend, and she's a prisoner in her own home. So please help us free Annice Moses.
Yay.
Yay!
Thanks, guys. Okay, yeah, I am very nervous. This is almost more nerve-wracking than being live in front of everybody. I don't know why, but thanks for being here. Okay, I titled this, There's a Nightmare in My Closet. I was a very frightened kid. I spent a tremendous amount of time during my childhood negotiating deals with God. Every night I would whisper from under my covers the same thing twice, just in case God had been distracted when I first asked. Please keep me, my family, and everyone I care about safe. Then I would shut my eyes so tightly I saw stars, my hands threaded together in the way I imagined people prayed in church. I hoped I looked pious and angelic enough that God would take me seriously and protect me and my loved ones so no monster would kill us in our sleep. Well, now that frightened little girl is woken up as a 48-year-old woman negotiating another monster named COVID-19 while being at the helm of a family of 3 teenage boys, an 11-year-old girl, 3 dogs, and 13 fish. So far, this has been my journey. I started reading about this flu-like virus sweeping through parts of Asia in January, like almost everybody else. And like almost everybody else in America, this felt very far away from me. I went about my usual business. Then I started hearing stories about an uptick in incidents of xenophobia geared at Asian students on college campuses. My dad, a psychologist, started sending me articles about the psychology of blame during times of crisis and uncertainty. As Jews, when we get even the slightest whiff of blaming the others, our traumatic history floods us and we brace for the worst. Initially, my focus was on educating my children, while I admittedly took some form of uneasy comfort in the demographical statistics that spared my immediate family. The very first week in March, I didn't go out and buy bottled water. I didn't go out and buy copious amounts of toilet paper. I went to the movies. I wasn't going to make a statement. I was going to feel normal. And I'm glad I did, because very shortly after that, daily life changed considerably. It shrank and it morphed, and the invisible monster was everywhere. The dear friend that I had sat next to in the movies became someone to fear. Everyone was. I've observed 2 distinctive responses from my friends regarding this whole shit show. I have one friend who put up a giant Post-it note of family activities. It goes like this: theme dinners, camping dinners, giant fort, PJs and TV, giant game board, ding dong ditch notes, spa day, scavenger hunt, just dance, quarantine Olympics, family exercises, game time, fairy tea party, grandparent care packages, sort bedrooms, sort closets, extreme sidewalk chalking, spirit week, pie face, bike rides, arts and crafts, mystery taste box, YouTube challenge, iMovie, family band, baking, daily chores, fairy picnic, The Voice, finger knitting, clay, formal dinner, queen puzzle, fashion show, gardening, beach sunrise, and paint rocks. What the actual fuck? My reply to that? Well, if I had a giant family Post-it note, it would read like this: have kids make beds, yell at kids for not making beds, flea house for 3-hour walk, eat salad after death march, tell kids to do laundry, yell at kids for not doing laundry, love that kids have electronics, yell at kids for being on their electronics, sprinkle in various time pockets for anxiety attacks during the day because I know I have COVID, take my temperature, sniff various essential oils to make sure I can still smell, pull hairs from my chin, decide I'm going blind, puzzle with my 11-year-old and secretly ponder when she too will betray me and go to the dark side with her brothers, hate on people who send pictures of their thrown together candlelit 4-course meals for their grateful children, eat the equivalent of 10 million calories at 2 a.m. because if no one sees me, it didn't happen. And then I have another friend who sent this text: I have just diagnosed myself with COVID-19 social isolation underachievement syndrome. It's already day 4 and I have not learned a new language, cleaned, purged, or organized anything. I have only made 1 recipe of baked goods and have only stockpiled my freezer from things from a store. I have not made bone broth, soup, or lasagnas. I have not done crafts with my children or meditated or done yoga, although that is on my list for tomorrow, I swear. I have not been to the beach to appreciate the beautiful lake or taken up Tai Chi or learned to cross stitch or managed to finish a book, not even the one I started before all of this. The pressure is just too much. Signing off now, your socially distanced friend. My reply to that: that was amazing. My overall approach, I think, has been decidedly wedged in the couch crack with crumbs and dog hair between both extremes, but with a leg stretching towards my more naturally underachieving, pessimistic self. I've had my crazy overachieving moments tied to deeper meaning and soul cleansing. I did attack my closet. I did make a pile that was 4 feet high of not just clothes that I didn't wear anymore, but clothes I was saving for when I got thinner, for when I got fatter. I did purge all the high-heeled shoes that looked beautiful but ended up unceremoniously shoved under tablecloths at weddings because they hurt my feet and blistered my heels. When that massive bag went out the door, yes, some of the metaphorical monster went with it. I did wrap fairy lights around our banister. I did have the kids write something that made them happy each day on our kitchen chalkboard. I did start making recipes from the New York Times cooking section. I was, for a period of time, a spammer in group texts of positivity, inspirational quotes, ways to see Broadway shows and visit museums remotely. I did compile and send lists of the must-see TV shows, the best DIY projects. I have sent pictures of my baking and my kids' neatly made beds. I have lost 5 pounds from walking 5 to 7 miles every day. I am composting. I have taught my kids things I should have taught them years ago: how to make their beds, how to fold their clothes, how to clean a bathroom, how to iron. I have bragged about my oldest teaching himself guitar and learning German, his journaling, his working out, his walking the dogs, and spending meaningful time with his siblings without being asked. But I have also gone to the dark side. I have sat on the floor of my slimy shower and wept. I've yelled at my kids. I've yelled at the dogs. It's probably unnecessary to add that I've yelled at my husband, but I have. I had murderous thoughts about the bird that shat on my painted rock. I haven't sought redemption or closure or forgiveness from anyone in my past. I haven't forgiven my enemies. In fact, I've ratcheted up my hatred for a few. Sometimes it's hard to get out of bed, and sometimes I hide for infinite periods of time under the covers. But worst of all, and this is really hard to say, worst of all, I have allowed the purchase of Grand Theft Auto, sanctioning the morphing of my beautiful 16 and 14-year-old boys into lawless, morally bankrupt, murderous, bloodthirsty hooligans whose pupils dilate when they talk about the hits they've executed, exactly like the meth heads I've seen on Intervention. Go ahead and judge me. I don't blame you. One night after dinner, I was feeling especially worn down. The daily veneer I'd been consciously lacquering on thickly with an expert brush was chipping. I could feel it in my bones. I was annoyed at my oldest, who had just stomped off in a snit, and at the same time I was trying to understand / explain / process his perspective. I was thankful the only witnesses left at the dinner table were my 2 younger boys and my husband. Let the littlest of the little be blissfully unaware. Let the oldest steep in his self-righteousness in his bedroom. Let the middles decide for themselves. I turned to my husband. I think it's just about his sense of losing control of things. Possibly, my husband replied. My second oldest turned to me. Do you think you're losing control? My initial instinct was to be snarky, because this particular kid can take some real fun in being provocative. But a snarky comeback felt like too much of an effort. So I just replied with complete honesty, completely raw. I was a very frightened kid. I never wanted that for my kids. I just don't want you to be scared. My sudden tears, a combination of relief and embarrassment. My husband took my hand under the table. My 2 boys looked uncomfortable. It's awkward to see your parents cry. I felt bad. I thought about how I could backtrack. A series of awkward throat clearings was all I could muster. And then almost in unison, my boys, suddenly looking somewhat amused, said, "We're not scared, Mom." And with that, the monster went poof.
Everything's stopping me. I'ma be what I set out to be, without a doubt, undoubtedly. And all those who look down on me, I'm tearing down your balcony. No ifs, ands, or buts, don't try to ask him why or how can he. From infinite down to the last relapse album, he's still and whether he's on salary, paid hourly, until he bows out or he just bows out of him. Whatever comes first, for better or worse. He's married to the gang, like a for Christmas.
Wow, that was so awesome. Thank you so much, Annice. If you are joining us now, we are Louder Than a Mom, and we are recording this. We were hoping to go on to Facebook Live, and that did not work out the way I was hoping it was going to. We have just heard from Annice Moses. That was so awesome. That was so hilarious. I find myself kind of loving that the kids are sort of freeform now. It reminds me of when I was little and we used to play outside. Like they can't go to field hockey. I like seeing them home. But I also don't have little kids, so I can't imagine what that is like. I can only watch from afar, and it looks great. Thank you so much. Yes, Grand Theft Auto is every organized parent's nightmare. We are moving on. We have our third. Thank you so much, Annice. Amy, God bless you, and thank you so much for telling that first story, for breaking the hymen of Louder Than a Mom on Zoom. And we are moving on to our third storyteller. He is awesome guy, Mark Sutton. He's a veteran improviser and actor. He's a founding member of the Annoyance Theater and has been performing across North America for over 30 years. Maybe you've seen him in Bass Prov. Maybe. Please welcome back our friend, Mark Sutton.
Thanks, Dee. This story is titled Up the Creek. With the onset of COVID-19, our family, for all intents and purposes, have relocated to Wisconsin to stay with my wife's father. He's 82 and in the high-risk category, so we felt it would be prudent to keep an eye on him. Recently, I was sitting and looking at the lake and pondering all of my achievements. I was coming off the end of a 25-day self-isolation, or was it 26? 30? Shit, maybe it was 30. I don't know, I've lost track, but I was thinking about all the things that I'd done. I was now teaching 8th grade, and I also had a side job teaching 3rd grade. I label this the side job because the 8th grader is far more high maintenance, and when left to his own devices, he won't do any schoolwork. Both of those, of course, are part-time jobs. I share them with another teacher, my wife. I'm also working in a limited capacity in my first job, Second City, and in addition, I've had gigs as a landscaper, a dog groomer, and have become very adept at power washing. Anything to keep busy so I don't think about too much of the things that I'm missing. But as I sat on this particular evening looking at the lake and watching a new nesting pair of wood ducks busily dunking themselves, searching for dinner, I began to think less of things done and more of things undone. And my mind drifted back to last summer and a family trip we took to Peru. We love to travel, and the thought of seeing new places or visiting old favorites has always appealed to us. It's always been part of our lives. That love will sometimes lend itself to a very strong desire for adventure. And last summer, the adventure bug hit us. After considering several options, we crossed off the list for seasonal weather, political uncertainty, cost. We landed on a trip to the Amazon rainforest. We wanted to be out of our comfort zone, somewhere remote and unpredictable, and this seemed to fit the bill. After a couple days exploring Lima, I found out it has almost 10 million people and is one of only 2 South American capitals located on the ocean, something my students in 3rd and or 8th grade might find interesting at some point. We boarded a plane over the Andes to a remote town in southeastern Peru called Puerto Maldonado. From there, we were put on a bus and escorted by armed guards to a tiny river outpost. And from there, we would board long flatboats with small motors and travel 3 hours up the Tambapato River to the first of the 2 lodges where we were going to stay in the Tambapato Nature Reserve. Our research had told us that the boats were taking us into one of the most remote places on Earth, miles away from any town or settlement or farm. Each of the 2 lodges was an eco-lodge with working scientists on site. The first was conducting a study of tiger moths, and the second, which was another 3 hours upriver from the first, even more remote, studied macaws. There was plenty of each animal there, and so many other animals too. We saw monkeys, tarantulas, insects of all kinds, parrots, other birds, pumas, capybaras, you name it. We had a small possum-like creature visit our room on several occasions, usually at nighttime. You know, it's weird to hear a noise of a creature eating something in the dark of night, not knowing exactly what that creature might be or where exactly in your room it is. You sit in the dark, eternally debating whether you want to turn on a light to see what it is, or if it's just best to ignore it, unless it's actually sitting on your bed. I looked, finally, once. It was adorable, small and fuzzy, with a bushy tail and big dark eyes. Of course, over the several nights, it ate the fruit from our bowl we'd mistakenly left out, and even soap in our bathroom. I think it's because the soap was floral scented. The animal highlight for me came very early on the last morning. We were up before dawn to take the now 6-hour boat ride back. We had turned in our bags the night before so they could be loaded on the boat, and discovered on this chilly morning that our 8-year-old had no pants. In our defense, it had been cold in the jungle, a rare occurrence, but one we were dealing with, and our rooms had only 3 walls with one side open to the forest. So we had spent every night sleeping in our clothes, but on this night, for some reason unknown, the boy decided to actually change into pajamas, and all his pants had been packed. I raced down the walkway in an attempt to retrieve some, and walking back, I heard a rustling on the jungle floor. It was a sound that I hadn't heard before, so I shined my light over the side. And to my surprise, I got a full view of a giant armadillo. I later found out from our guide that these nocturnal creatures are almost never seen in the wild, and many local indigenous people feel that they represent the earth itself. They believe that the ground we walk on is the belly of the armadillo, and we must tread carefully so as not to disturb him. Whenever there's an earthquake or other disruption, they believe the armadillo is moving out of discomfort, and they dance to calm him down. It's a sacred animal in that part of Peru. I had a once-in-a-lifetime experience, all because of a pair of lost pants. There are so many parallels from that trip to now for me. I can't remember how many times we stopped and stared in wonder at animals, the forest, how clean the air was. And now I sat and marveled at the small wonder of 2 ducks trying to make a home for themselves on the shore of this lake. We overcame, as you do in travel, flight issues, traffic, language barriers, and now we're being asked to overcome again boredom, isolation, lack of control. There were times of uncertainty. I was plagued for 2 days by what may politely be called gastrointestinal issues, but not politely something very different. And let me say, you'll probably never be placed in a space of uncertainty quite like having to step off the trail in the ink-black darkness of the jungle and drop your pants to answer a very urgent call from nature. And we were reminded that there's more. There's more out there. My favorite moment of the trip came on our final hike. We had left the river and gone up a creek that was dotted with prints of jaguar, ocelot, tapir. We waded through cold water and mud that came up to the top of our knee boots. Mud so thick that we often had to help each other take the next step. When the time came, our guide, Saul, said we needed to turn back to the river. My 8-year-old looked longingly up the creek to the bend where the water disappeared into the thick green jungle. "How far does the creek go?" he asked. And Saul replied, "Nobody knows." "Can we find out?" "Not today, buddy. Not today." And that's what this is all about, and what my hope for all this is. When this is over, and someday it will be over, I hope we don't let it make our world small, that we don't close ourselves off. We all, I think, have those creeks. We look at them, whether real or metaphorical, and ask, how far does it go? We ask ourselves, can we find out? And then for whatever reason, we or someone else says, "Not today, buddy. Not today." Don't listen. We are not done. Those creeks are out there. Don't let them bend off into the jungle and wander. Find out where they go.
I can carry in my song. I'm a rolling stone, just rolling on. Catch me now, 'cause tomorrow I'll be gone. Family man gives me a ride.
Kate, I think you need to unmute yourself, but I'm sure you're saying something very thoughtful about wonderful Mark
Oh,
Sutton.
there I am.
So I will let you continue.
Okay.
But Mark, I loved it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Go
All
for
right,
it,
can you hear
Kate.
me now, Erin?
Yes.
Okay,
Kate,
great.
Kate, tell us where you are.
Well, I'm at Martyrs. Can you see
Oh.
the stage?
Oh, we miss it. We miss
I know. It's so awful. I show you everything else, but all the chairs are on top of the tables and it's dark. Very, very dark in here. Yeah, Mark, that was really a great story. Thank you for sharing. And I was saying something really amazing and beautiful. You guys just missed it. So, you know, another time. But keep going down those rivers, people.
Yes.
So we have another river, Joy Wright. She is a best of the net performer. She's a storyteller. She is an activist. She's a mother of some wild teens, and she is a super badass. Joy Wright.
I'm going to talk to you tonight a little bit about dating during a pandemic. So it was March 12th, and we met for brunch in Greektown, just before it became apparent that COVID-19 was going to change everything. I was still living in this wash your hands, bump elbows, don't stand so close to me world. I chose Greektown because it was a short distance from Union Station, where he'd be stopping by on a pre-planned journey from flying in from Houston to Chicago, and then taking a shuttle from Chicago up to Madison, Wisconsin, where he lived. I met him on Bumble by accident. Not that I was on Bumble by accident. Bumble's a dating app. It's just that I accidentally met this guy from out of town on Bumble, because I have my dating, my distance sites set clearly at 10 miles around Chicago, except it's not that clear. It means 10 miles from wherever you are at the moment that you swipe right. But when I saw him there and that he was in Madison, since he was cute and our politics were the same, I thought, why not give it a try? So as I entered this restaurant, I got a look at him from the side. And he actually looked like his picture. Score. If I went out with one more person who was 10 years older or 2 inches shorter than they said they were, I was done dating. I was giving up. As he stood as I came around the table, and we both kind of awkwardly bumped elbows. I had considered canceling this date when people started to talk about the coronavirus and it started to seem like it was ramping up. But I figured we would keep a safe distance across the table, so why overreact? Then we ordered, and I discovered he was a vegetarian. Cute, liberal, and a vegetarian. He was hitting all my yes buttons. We ate and we talked until it became apparent that it was time to move out of the restaurant, even though there was nobody waiting for tables. We decided to take a walk. He stood significantly taller than my 5 foot 10 inches in my 2-inch wedges, and we headed out into a crisp, breezy, what was turning into a beautiful sunny day. We walked through Greektown, down Randolph and through the Loop, where we stopped and peeked in the city winery windows, since that's all you could do, and admiring the enormous steel vats of wine and talking about all the live music we'd seen over the last year and all the live music we'd planned to see this summer. He was a little shy, but I started teasing him that if he got me sick with the COVID-19, it was all his fault, that I'd never be able to date again. I would not have made those jokes about the virus so lightly if I had known how bad it was going to get. As we headed back, we decided to stop in a nearly empty coffee shop to warm up a bit and linger over another cup, not really wanting this date to end. After close to 6 hours, I gave him a ride back to where he had left his luggage. His cute, flirty smile, tilt of the head and elbow bump as he got out of my car left me with the tingles. Dreamily, I turned on the radio. And that was when I learned that Governor Pritzker had just ordered all the restaurants in the state to close. It felt like the entire world changed while I was in some alternate universe staring into this handsome stranger's eyes and bumping elbows. This stranger who'd just gotten off an airplane. I had no idea we were headed for a shutdown when the date started, but the danger became apparent in the governor's voice as I listened to him on the radio on my way home. That night at 2 a.m., I woke up burning up, soaked in sweat, my face flushed. Just a hot flash, I thought at first, since I am a woman of a certain age. But can a hot flash last for over 2 hours? As I lay there staring in the dark and wiping sweat off my forehead and cheeks in cycles that rapidly turned to cold shivers and then back to the heat again, I got scared. Not only had I exposed myself, but I'd headed directly from the state over to my ex's house to meet with her and her wife, who's immune compromised, hug my teenagers, drink out of their glasses, and talk about our family's strict social distancing rules. After that, I'd headed over to my friend's house to pick up some gluten-free carrot cake and ended up sitting far across the living room from each other, but for a couple hours, because we were both afraid we wouldn't be in a room with somebody again. Horror washed over me as these cycles of hot and cold flashed over me in the dark, and I worried about all the people I loved who I had just exposed to COVID-19. But as it turned out, I was fine in the morning. Menopause had picked this very unfortunate time to ramp up its attack. In relief, I swore allegiance that I will strictly, strictly, strictly social distance. Now here we are, we're in this world, ordered to shelter in place, work from home, and engage with others pretty much only virtually. The whole world changed while I was enjoying that date. And while dating is certainly not the biggest issue right now, I do wonder, do I still date? And if so, how do I date? Does it make any sense? But then I figure, I like things to move really slowly when I start dating somebody. And if it's going to be virtual, it's going to move slow. I mean, really slow. So for now, I'm dating on WhatsApp, wearing a sexy top paired with my old flannel pajama bottoms. It gives me a reason to put on some makeup and reminds me of what I look like when I actually am required to brush my hair. I guess bumbling into meeting this guy on Bumble makes sense right now, since all of life feels like we're just bumbling into this uncharted territory and figuring out how to engage in a new world, one new app at a time.
Just drove off, sometimes like the king. I ran my mouth off a bit too much. What did I say? Well, you just laughed it off, but it's all okay.
Joy, that was awesome. I think everyone is going to remember what their last day of freedom was like, kind of, but yours was particularly, you touched a lot of people in a lot of ways. But yeah, we're all so stuck, and we're so glad we were stuck here to hear this story. And I'm so blown away with how amazing all these stories, how much they resonate, but also just how amazing this is. I'm sitting I have my dusty exercise bike behind me, and I'm sitting here crying, laughing, everything. So thank you all so much. This has been a treat. And whether we're live or not, we're all alive. So let's just keep going. This is terrific. Our next storyteller is just one of our favorite people. He's a photographer, a cancer survivor, a swimmer, and we're just so glad that he's with us. So please help us welcome back Braulio Fonseca.
Hi. Is the mic working pretty good too right now?
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, great.
You sound great.
All right. When I was young, I dreamt of being a superhero with incredible superpowers. Hell, even today as an adult, I find myself imagining what it would be like to manifest unfathomable energy from within my being, raise my hands to the air, and propel myself into the sky, flying at Mach 5 across the universe. I remember a time as a small boy, I was standing at my bus stop waiting for my ride to school. While I waited, I felt the urge, and I completely believed it possible and leapt into the air, grabbed my feet with both hands, and took flight. Seconds later, I crashed to the earth, smashing both knees against the ground. Pain shot through my body, and I began to cry. The hurt was bad, but the pain I endured realizing I wasn't actually able to fly was tenfold. I am no hero, nor do I possess superpowers. But in my life, I have given witness to fearless heroics and powerful acts in humanity that have inspired me to be a better man and attempt to inspire others as well. On July 27th, 2019, I made another attempt. The San Francisco air was cool and matched the water temperature of the bay, 56 degrees. Fog loomed and the sky was a muted gray. At approximately 9:30 a.m., off the shore of the infamous prison Alcatraz, I dove from the side of a tour boat that was carrying 850 swimmers and entered the bay without a wetsuit. My body was covered in the names of 150 cancer warriors. People from across the country had been reaching out and sharing names of loved ones passed or loved ones thick in the fight of cancer treatments. Some of the names were proud survivors, and some who had just been diagnosed. This was my tribute. I paddled idly for 15 minutes, waiting for the entirety of competitors to enter the water. As time ticked on, my body temperature began to drop, and by the time the race had begun, I was already cold to the core, teeth chattering, body quivering. A horn sounded, signaling the start, and a thunderous mob of nervous and excited athletes exploded forward toward the shores of San Fran. Bodies were everywhere, and limbs and water seemed to be flung about like shrapnel. Each swim stroke forward was cut short due to a body in the front, side, and rear. Each breath to the side was obstructed by another swimmer's splash or arm entering the water near the face. For a moment, a female swimmer was directly to my side, and we were in perfect unison, stroke for stroke, breath for breath. I remember watching her and feeling a moment of ease and thought to myself, I can stay with this. And I felt comfortable being beside her. A smile showed itself on my face and I was confident. It was exactly at the moment of comfort that a shocking jolt brought me back to an icy, chaotic reality. A hand grabbed my right ankle and jerked me back down into the water in mid-breath, mid-stroke. The fear alone was enough to put my body in a new sense of angst. When I reached the surface, my counterpart, whom I'd felt comfort, was lost in the progressive wall of splashing water, thrust by the feet of 850 swimmers kicking in a fury. I had to find a new mantra, a new way to stay in the zone. So one by one, I began to say the warriors' names on my back. Kelly Klein, Fred Berger, Vincent Liberto, Michelle Boyd DeJong. I remembered those who had passed away after their battles and those who were still in the fight. I thought of the messages I had received over the past few months and the stories people had shared with me as they gave me the names of those they loved. Name by name, soul by soul, stroke by stroke, I continued. As I neared the mile mark of the 1.5 mile swim, I began to notice a change in my awareness. My vision began to alter, and with each breath, as I looked out at the bay, my world began to violently swirl to a blur. I couldn't feel my arms as they dug into the sea, and my legs seemed to swell and anchor me backwards. I barely had enough time in this moment to even realize what was happening. I was going hypothermic, and my body was going into shock. In a delirious state, I continued to swim forward until a man who was completely lost in the water cut in front of me, forcing me to stop in my tracks so as not to collide. It was this action that set off a chain of events that would prove crippling. My abdomen began to contract and my air was constricted. The sound that came from my mouth was a deafening moan of pain and anguish. From my toes to my head, my body constricted inward. It was as if I was giving birth, my body experiencing full contractions. I looked out into the mess of water, bodies, and kayaks, and it all began to vanish before my eyes. And in that, the final act of my will was the raising of my right arm toward the east as everything went black. My body temperature was 79 degrees when I was pulled from the bay. My eyes pierced shut in pain, my mouth foaming and slurring as my face trembled uncontrollably, my body convulsing and contracting in hysteria. The paramedics later said that it was everything I could do to murmur my own name just one time during the wailing and writhing of shock. My eyes didn't open again until I was in the ER and being warmed by a plastic suit with hot air as they did, tears filled them and overflowed down my cheeks in complete and utter sadness, just as they had when I was a boy crashing to my knees in an attempt to fly. I had failed, I thought. I had let down not only myself, but hundreds of amazing human beings and souls who deserved better than what I had given them. I was distraught and humiliated. My immediate reaction was that it would have been better to die in that water than to be where I was now, in a hospital, defeated. It took nearly a month for me to wrap my head around that day, that race, that moment I raised my hand for help. Many nights staring out to the stars, asking for the reason, the answer, and the direction I should turn. In the end, it was the abundance of support that filled my heart with love and allowed me to see just how powerful this event was to so many people. Their loved ones were in living action as they swam with me across the bay. And what better way to be honored? And it was in that I found my purpose and my superpower. I said I wanted to suffer, to do something I might not be able to complete, yet my head lowered as I actually accomplished exactly what I had set out to do. Suffer as a way to pay tribute to the suffering. I see now that a gold medal or a first place finish may not have served me as well as the reality I now understand. If suffering is what I seek, then I cannot wane in the wake of the suck. The very instant I was released from the hospital, I immediately signed up for next year's Alcatraz swim, the non-wetsuit category again. I will swim this race every year for the rest of my life. And while I learned valuable lessons from this first attempt, I will not be dismayed if every year I am pulled from the water in pain. I am committed to the suffering, and what better way to suffer than to fail and keep going. I am not a superhero who can leap buildings in a single bound, but if I was, I see now that suffering would be my superpower and a way for me to die proud. Due to the coronavirus, the swim has been postponed till August 22nd. But on August 22nd, I will jump in and try again. Thank you.
Thank you, Braulio. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good
Wow.
to know I sweat at my own house as much as I do on stage. Jesus. I'm a mess.
And you're actually sweating.
Dripping, like through my shirt. I'm soaked. Better than crying like last time.
That is it. Those are all our storytellers. Thank you so much for going for all of you going on this journey with us. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties, but we felt it was really important to continue having a conversation with our audience and to present people to our audience. These were great stories. I'm so happy. I don't know about you, but I'm going a little nutty here at home. And I want to thank all of our storytellers, Amy Eaton, Annice Moses, Joy Wright, Mark Sutton, Braulio Fonseca. Thank you so much for doing this. It's a whole new journey for all of us. And we'll see you next month. I will post this. And I also want to just say there are other storytelling shows that are going live, and we want to help promote those as well. Second City has a show that they're doing on Facebook, and that you can still see. Go to Second City on YouTube. It's a sketch show that they're doing each week, a new sketch show. Lily B is holding a game show, and she is also
I'm her co-host.
Oh,
Lily's the
yay.
co-host. Wow.
Amy.
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
And, she is also doing an open mic night. So you can go to Lily B. You can go to Chicago Storytellers and find more. You can go to Lily B's.
LilyB.com.
LilyB.com. And she's awesome, and I'm sure that show is great. And they're also looking. They always take new storytellers on the stoop. So if you're a new storyteller, this is a great time to do something new. And then also Stephanie Rogers is doing Friday. She's doing a Cocoon, it's called, and it's for new storytellers with feedback if you want it. And that's also on Chicago Storytellers. So why not? Why not give it and do something new? Thank you so much. It's a process. Kate. To you.
Oh my God, Braulio's story just
over at
got
Martyrs.
to me.
Oh, stop.
So
thank you all. We can't wait to be live again with all of you. We miss you all, every one of you.
Miss you.
Yes, and we're gonna put a GoFundMe for the people at Martyrs who help us out each month because they're missing money.
Chris, Dan, Freddie,
Dan and Freddie,
everybody.
Kate. So hope you will support that.
Help them out.
Yes. Thank you so much. I miss you all. It's so great to hear your stories. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Having us.
Thanks.
We
Everyone be
finished
well.
that business. No more unfinished business.
White Congregational Church in Stoddard.
Stop. I'm sorry, Amy. I can't fucking believe it. I didn't hit record.
Everybody's got the fever. That is something you all know. Fever isn't such a new thing. Fever started long ago.